Good evening. This is James G. Lyons, Regional Director for the Office of Price Stabilization in New York and New Jersey. Here in the studio with me for the current weekly edition of Your Pocketbook is Harold Leventhal, Chief Counsel of the OPS. Good evening, Harold.
Hello, Jim. It's nice to be here. What happens on this weekly broadcast of yours, Jim?
Well, Harold, this is a presentation of the Office of Price Stabilization, which is designed to bring the people in our region the latest up-to-date news on our agency's activities. And you can help us, Harold, in the job we're doing.
I'll be glad to do anything I can, Jim.
Well, as Chief Counsel of the Office of Price Stabilization, you are a top official, second in importance only to Mike DeSalle, our national price stabilizer. And I know that you have been working day and night to provide OPS regulations that will go a long way toward holding the price line. I think our listeners would be greatly interested in your views on the accomplishment of the OPS to date, and they would like to know, too, what the public can expect of OPS in the near future.
Well, Jim, I think that the OPS has had a number of very substantial accomplishments to date. In my own work, of course, that's pretty technical, the drafting of these regulations. And to a large extent, the OPS has been busy in fields that the general public doesn't get to know anything about. For example, we have been engaged over a long period of time in preparing and conferring with manufacturers about the manufacturer's regulation. Now, that's very important in the overall price stabilization system, because unless you can get firm control at the manufacturing level, you don't get it at any other level, but yet it's a whole program that the public hasn't been concerned with, you might say.
And that's especially important in this industrial area.
That's right. Now, we're also working now, for example, on a similar regulation for wholesalers. We're not yet ready to announce it, but I think we will be sometime within the next week or two. I think that may be important, certainly for New York City, which is such a large distributing center. At the retail level, that's where I think our regulations have the most impact upon the public. The first of our retail regulations is what is known as CPR 7. You know, that CPR stands for Ceiling Price Regulation. And that provides for a large class of retailers that they must file pricing charts which set forth their cost prices, their costs, and their ceiling prices for the goods that they sell. And as you know, May 30th is the deadline date for filing these ceiling price charts. That date was extended before, but it is not going to be extended again, and I think it's very important to call very clearly to the attention of the retailers an absolute necessity of getting that chart in by May 30.
I wonder, Harold, if you would please elaborate a bit upon what retailers are required to file. We have tried to impress upon the retailers of this region that they must be informed upon the subject of filing, and I wonder if you from the national office might outline briefly those retailers who must file.
Well, I think it's fair to state that most retailers are required to file for some of their commodities under this regulation. There would be exceptions, for example, in the case of just an ordinary food retailer, a grocery store. There are exceptions for maybe a coal yard or an oil filling station, which would also be classified as retailers. But retailers who sell dry goods or any apparel, shoes, furniture, any household appliances, most of the items which are in general sold at the retail stores are covered by this regulation, and the retailers should, I think, generally make the assumption that they are covered by it and get the precise information, if they're in doubt, from their local office. Now, there has been a lot of confusion about hardware retailers. We do not require in this regulation that the hardware retailer file a pricing chart for all his nuts, bolts, screws, and other miscellaneous items of hardware, but even he would be under the regulation, for example, for his pots and pans and items of that sort. Well, I was talking about our different price regulations. As I've just indicated, the grocery stores generally are not under this ceiling price regulation 7. They have a price regulation of their own. They don't have a pricing chart system. They have certain percentage margins that have been specified for them. Those regulations are already in effect. Our overall view on the national office is that they're working very well. Depending on how the retailer happened to be before, it may mean some price increases, it may mean some price decreases. Our indications are that the price decreases actually have been more extensive than the price increases so far.
In other words, Harold, for all practical purposes, every retailer should make it a point to ascertain whether or not he comes under one of these regulations, and if he does, what filing he should submit.
That's right. And, of course, you have set up a system, haven't you, Jim, in your local offices here to provide information to the retailers when they inquire?
Yes, we have, and we welcome inquiries in hopes that we may be of assistance to the businessmen of this region.
Now, the one thing that's missing in both of these regulations that we at the OPS know full well is very important to a good ceiling price program is posting of prices. So far, we haven't been able to get posted prices under our general grocery regulation because most of the farm commodities are below parity, and there's a provision in the law which requires us to return at least parity to farmers, a provision which we are in general agreement with and which we respect. But meanwhile, that makes it very difficult as an administrative matter to set up a posting system, a system whereby the ceiling prices are actually posted. But as you know, we have done that in the case of the beef ceilings, which have just gone into effect, and which specify different ceiling prices for each cut and for each grade of beef. Those beef prices are required to be posted in the stores, and I think that that kind of a regulation means that the price control is easier to understand, both for the public and for the retailer, and is going to be more enforceable, and I think gives an opportunity to the consumer to do a more effective job in helping us to control prices. Don't you agree with that, Jim?
Makes price control a little more tangible. And I assume from what you say that your time schedule now calls for eventually the posting of prices in all retail establishments, especially in the food line.
Yes, I would say more in the food line than in any other, Jim. We have a program now under study, and I think that in a matter of a couple of months, maybe a few months, it will be possible to extend this posting much more generally than it is now, and we have a hope of getting to something like the community pricing system, which was in effect during World War II and was, I think, one of the most successful parts of the program.
Well, Harold, while we're on the subject of food, I think there has been considerable talk in this region and misunderstanding about Mr. DeSalle's statement last Sunday regarding the possibility of rationing. I think that what he said was misunderstood, and I wonder if we might have your interpretation of his remarks.
Yes, I think that's important, and I think he has been misunderstood. I was there in the studio when he was talking, and what he said was that there weren't any present plans or any present planning for rationing, that there are no ration books that have been printed, and there's no present program under which they are being printed. One of the reporters who were interviewing him then asked whether there would be rationing in a matter of a few months, and he explained that why you couldn't even get the ration books printed after you started it for a matter of some 3 months. Somehow or other, that's given some people the idea that we now plan rationing for a few months from now, but that isn't so. He was just explaining that even if it should be decided at some future time to start in on a rationing program, it would require, as just a physical matter, at least a few months for the printing of the ration books. I hope that clarifies a misconception that otherwise seems to be prevailing.
Unfortunately, I think there was a misunderstanding as a result of that interview, and perhaps in some instances it has almost led to scare buying. Now, on the subject of scare buying, I think frequently we are our own worst enemies, and it might be comforting to our listeners to hear from you, from the national level, your attitude and understanding as to the supply of food and commodities in general in this country. Is there a shortage, or is there apt to be a shortage?
Well, I don't think there's any question about the fact that there's no real sensible reason for any scare buying, that there are no shortages overall, such as existed during the Second World War. We have a larger production for civilian purposes than we had then, We have bigger inventories prevailing at the moment. I think that any housewife who goes in for scare buying is not only doing a disservice to her country, but she's doing a disservice to herself, because it leads to a lot of price pressure, and it just means that she is stuck with articles that she may not want and that she's bought at prices perhaps higher than she'll pay later on.
In other words, you feel that all consumers, and housewives especially, should buy wisely, that they should buy only what they need when they need it.
I wish I could have said it that well. That's exactly what I think. I think there's also been some misunderstanding about our beef regulation with respect to the rollback. Some people thought that, in view of the fact that we had a rollback program, that meant that prices were going to go down at the retail level right away. Now, the first action that we took was a rollback at the level of the livestock, the actual cattle. And that was necessary because these cattle have not been under price control since January 26th. As a practical and mechanical matter, we couldn't get them in under that regulation. And we had to roll back the increase that has taken place in the last few months in order to make it possible to keep generally the present level of beef prices. But we now plan in the future for August 1st and for October 1st further rollbacks at the level of the livestock cattle, and those rollbacks will be translated into specific rollbacks at the retail level in excess of 8 cents a pound on the average.
In other words, the rollback now on livestock will eventually work its way down through the wholesale and distribution level to the retailer.
No, the current rollback at the livestock level will not make much of a change in present retail levels. What it does is to remove a very bad squeeze, which was otherwise in effect on the packers, wholesalers, and retailers. But the future rollbacks will be translated into rollbacks at the retail level.
That's ultimate right. Consumer.
And will be shown right up in the weekly pocketbook of the housewife, of the ordinary purchasing man and woman. Now, of course, the price control program is pretty complicated. We have a lot of regulations, and we have to have a lot of regulations because there are so many different ways of doing business in this country, Jim. You just find people...
We're just not stereotyped in our economy.
That's right. We have a variety in the ways that people do business, and we try to get regulations for each one of them.
Well, now, Harold Leventhal, that just about brings us to the end of this particular edition of Your Pocketbook, a weekly presentation of the Office of Price Stabilization. But before we go, I want to remind our listeners that OPS district offices are located at 401 Fifth Avenue in New York City, and in Albany, Rochester, Syracuse, and Buffalo in the state of New York, in Newark, Camden, and Trenton in the state of New Jersey. All of these offices are staffed with friendly people whose job it is to help anyone seeking more information about the Office of Price Stabilization. Our guest this week on Your Pocketbook was Harold Leventhal, Chief Counsel of the Office of Price Stabilization. And this is James G. Lyons, Regional OPS Director for New York and New Jersey. Your Pocketbook, produced by Bill Seilig, is a weekly presentation of the station to which you are listening.